Hi there, welcome to the FollowUp, and here with Pastor Chad, lead pastor of Freedom Life Church, and we are talking about this week's message. This was part 2 of the Advent series, and we're just moving right along. Another really great message, and if you missed the message, you can go watch it. There's a link right below this, or you can go on our website and catch all of our messages there. But I know we had a lot of stuff going on this Sunday, so I don't know if you intentionally kept it short, but it was fairly short as far as you go.
Was it
anyway.
short as far as I go?
So I just always like to ask: was there anything that you left out or felt you didn't have time to address?
Well, no, I guess not. We could have went a lot of different places. Originally I was going to kind of jump back to like the Old Testament text that he quotes, in the Hebrews 2 text, the Psalms 8, what is man, that he's mindful of him. But I had a great conversation with somebody, this week, after the sermon about just how clever the writer of Hebrews is at this point, because of what he does in that text right there is so cool, because he brings what John, the Apostle John, is talking about in John 1, which is where we spent really a bulk of our time. But the writer of Hebrews kind of brings it in, but it's really, really subtle and underneath if you don't catch it, because he quotes the Psalms 8 text about who is man or who is mankind, depending on what version. That's what brought it up in the conversation. Is I had somebody come to me and say, well, I'm reading this version and it says they and not he. And isn't it supposed to be Jesus that they're talking about when he's quoting the he's that you read? Because my version, my ESV says he. I think he had NIV and it says they in those texts. And I said, well, listen to what he says. And we read it together. And it is man, and he in my ESV does mean all of mankind. But then if you watch his language, he then switches the he to then say, and then he says it later on in the text, namely Jesus. Yeah. And so he switches it to say, but really all things are subjected not just to mankind, but really what we're talking about is Jesus, but that's because he's a part of mankind, because he came and was born and lived as fully man. So the writer of Hebrews is including him in this concept, and then changes the he to mean singular Jesus. And I really think we didn't talk about that on Sunday. Quite honestly, I didn't even think to really mention it at all. So when the question came, I thought, it's really cool what he does. And like I said, we kind of read it together, and I figured I'd mention it here because I was just like, that's a really cool way to look at it, because the writer of Hebrews is going, this guy Jesus was born in the flesh, but he's God. But he was born in the flesh. He is the Son of God, is what it says. But he is born in the flesh. He's fully man as well. So he reads that text about mankind and God being mindful of them and everything being in subjection and all of this, to then go, now Jesus was made a little lower than the angels as well, and he stepped into mankind, and so it's really, really cool. And if you're not really paying attention in that moment, or if you've got like his version, it's going to use they and then turn around and use he. Whereas if you've got the ESV, it's a little bit closer to the actual translation, because it's meant to feel that way. It's meant to feel he and he, but it's meaning all of humanity here, and then it brings Jesus into it. I don't know. It's a really cool way to do it. And so, I just think it's really clever. Whoever the writer of Hebrews is, because there is debate about that. I would give him a high five on that one.
Yeah, it's
because it's pretty cool.
It's always fun. And, I know you mentioned the possibility of future a series on Hebrews, and that would be a lot of fun.
So. Well, because, like I said, I was going to go a couple of different places. We almost went to Hebrews 1 as well, where at the very top it talks about God communicating through the prophets in the old times, but now he's communicating through his son, through Jesus, who is the exact representation. He is the radiance of God's glory, which is kind of what John is talking about in John chapter 1. There's this glory in the fullness of the Son of God that's full of grace and truth, that brings grace upon grace to those that would receive it. And he becomes this exact representation. You want to know what God looks like? Here he is in the flesh. Here he is. He's going to walk in front of you, and you get the chance to see really what he looks like, because Jesus is the exact representation of his being, is what the writer of Hebrews will say in chapter 1. And there's also that great text that we almost went to in Colossians 1 as well, where it talks about this is who Jesus is, and it walks all the way through. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation, that by him all things were made. And so all of the writers in the New Testament agree with John in this text in John 1. And so we just kind of anchored down there, but I really wanted us to get to the Hebrews 2 text, obviously, because really where I wanted to land was just in how he shared not just flesh with us, but when it says the Word is made flesh, it means he shares in all of it. He partakes of all of what it is to be human and live in this life and breathe this air,
Yeah, and so starting in John 1, that was sort of where you were kicking off, and the whole idea was to talk about what it means for when it says the Word, he was the Word, and then what that means that the Word became flesh and all that. And he sort of mentioned it last week too, about the whole idea that, Jesus could have just shown up and hopped on the cross and been done with it. But it wouldn't have been as significant, if he hadn't lived that life.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even completed the work of what we understand as the gospel. It wouldn't have completed the work, because he wouldn't have had the righteous life lived in the flesh to then gift to us. And that's one of those elements that I think I consistently try to point out, is that the life of Jesus is so important to what the gospel even says to us. And so it's not just that he dies for our sins. That's awesome. But if he only showed up and died for sins, then we could be forgiven of sin, but we wouldn't be made righteous, because the righteousness that he imputes to us comes from the fact that he lived like us. He came and put on flesh and dwelt among us and walked this earth and experienced what we experience, so that when he dies on the cross and rises again, he imputes to you and I righteousness. And he gives us the righteousness. So his death is forgiveness of sin, and his life is righteousness that fills the gap, that makes us what he wants us to be. And then resurrection is the new life that we now walk in, because we've received his righteousness and been washed of sin through his blood. And now in his resurrection, it's newness of life, is what Paul says in Romans 6. And so I just, that's really maybe the main motivation for doing the series anyways, is just to go, the birth of Jesus, Christmas, is a great celebration of the coming of the gospel, the gospel work on earth. It's finally here. The work of redemption has arrived, and I think that it's good for us to center our hearts and kind of pay attention to that reality, so.
And the whole kind of idea of, the importance of Jesus coming and living as human, and that I think is really what, in that Hebrews 2 text it was really talking about. And then right towards, I guess it was about in the middle of the text we read, this great verse 11 says, "For he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified have one source, and that is why he is not ashamed to call them brothers." And that hit me when you were talking about that, and the whole idea that, because of the fact Jesus came, and this blew my mind. The other day I was thinking about this. I was like, Jesus walked in our shoes, which is a weird thought, when you think it should be the other way around. But the whole point of that is he gets it. He knows exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
And then I love that at the end, and he's not ashamed to call you a brother because of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, that definitely hits you in the feels, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Because, and I think so much of the glory of God and the glory of the gospel is, I think, really captured in that type of a moment. Mm-hmm. Because I think the way I said it on Sunday was, so that means you don't have a God, you don't have a Jesus that's standing there tapping his foot like, why can't you get your crap together?
Yeah.
Where he's so insensitive and so disconnected, and it's really the greatness of our God, the glory of our God that where some religions put God very transcendent. He's up way above us, and we have to do everything to try to get to him. Mm-hmm. And then there's other religions and thought processes about God where, no, God is exactly like us. And so, we're gods as well, or, if we do, he's just in nature. And so there is no transcendence. So there is no holiness. There is no kind of holy reverence for God. It's just, he's down here with us. So what difference does it make? Whereas then we have this miracle of Christ, the true God, the living God that goes, I'm transcendent, but I'm also immanent at the same time. Yeah. Like I'm going to do both. And you're going to see me in this reality. And I think it brings such confidence in our God that he isn't the insensitive, transcendent God that we're just trying to do enough to please, to get to, but it's also not this, non-lofty, no real power, just like us, so who cares God either. Mm-hmm. He meets us in this space where, he's both transcendent and immanent. He's both a God that will judge, but he's also the God that came to save.
Yeah.
He's a God of justice, but he's also now a God of grace, and we receive grace upon grace. And he comes down and he, as the writer of Hebrews will go on to say, becomes sympathetic. He empathizes with our reality. He does that where some religions maybe struggle with that because the God that they've created is a God that goes, you should be better than this. Stop messing everything up and you can finally get to me. Whereas our God says, you're a mess, so I'm going to come for you and I'm going to make things right in you. And so he's not waiting around to I will say this, even as a believer, that helps me day in and day out with my wrestling with the sins that I still have to wrestle with. That gives me confidence in my fight.
Really great thoughts. Again, really enjoying the series. It's a unique way to look at Christmas, and I think it's good to get that in because everybody sort of. I was talking to some people last night. I think we kind of start to take this time of the year for granted, and so it's nice to put some new thoughts and perspective on it.
Yeah, because we certainly say little quips. He's the reason for the season. I think I picked on that, like a week ago. Or put Christ back in Christmas. And we say those things, but then a lot of times they're literally just what they are. They're just little sayings that we say, but we don't really grasp that idea. And I think, I'm hoping, or at least this is my hope, is that we're actually taking it up, taking those quips up on reality and saying we really do want to celebrate Jesus being the reason why we're celebrating, and that we really are elevating Christ during the Christmas season and really seeing we're celebrating the coming of Christ, the coming of Jesus, which signifies the beginning of the gospel. And I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
well, again, if you missed the message, you can watch it. There's a link right below this, and then there you can always go on our website and get it there. So this week is the final life group of the semester.
It's been a good fall semester.
It has been. It's been very good. Again, also Freedom Kids and the FLC Student Ministries will be meeting tonight, and then we'll take a break for the holidays, and then come back later on. And another big thing coming up is One Starry Night on December 22nd, and you can go right now and reserve your time slot on our website. There will be a link in with this. It's freedomlifechurch.net, and then you can get there from the events page.
Yeah.
Or you can go on the app, the FLC app. You open the app up, there's a button right there you can click, and it'll take you right to it. And that will help sort of streamline the process a little
bit.
We're learning.
We are.
But we're looking forward to it. Last year was great. This year, I think, is shaping up to be even better. So make sure you invite some friends to come with you. And we will see you all next time.
Yeah.
So
see you.